And I'm going to pull up some slides. And then if more folks join us, I'll be sure to let them in. I will be checking the chat. I might not get to your question or comment right when it comes in, but please use that. And it's a really small group. So if like I miss it, please just come off mute and share or ask the question right then. Oh, 1 second, I did presenter view, hold on. You don't want to look at that. And my name is Allison Klee, and I am one of the directors for Camp Stomping Ground. We are a overnight summer camp located in Saratoga Springs, New York. And I also included that I'm currently in graduate school where I did some working with teens this past year. So I'm excited to talk with y'all today. We are going to run through program ideas, setting boundaries with teens, conflict resolution, all that good stuff. And I'm also hoping to get a sense of what y'all are really here for and what you're hoping to talk about in hearing about what you're most confident in when it comes to teen programming and what you are most nervous or concerned about. So, okay, now that I have the presenter mode off, let me turn that up. Okay, so to start, we are going to do an icebreaker to get to know one another in breakout rooms. If you have to use chat, that's totally cool, but it's more fun if you're able to come off mute. We're then going to do a vibe check where, has anyone ever used Mentimeter before? I'm sure people in other sessions do. Cool. Seeing some thumbs. Where I just want to get a sense of where folks are at in terms of how confident you're feeling with teen stuff, things you're nervous about. We're then going to run through some different statistics and like mental health stuff regarding teens. We know that people are coming with a lot of that. And so just to kind of get us on the same page about what we are taking on and what we should be considering when it comes to teens and their needs right now. We'll then go through some ideas for building relationships, things to share with your staff or your leadership team, conflict resolution, and then do some rapid fire program ideas at the end. You will also get the opportunity to be in a group and share a program idea for yourself as well. Okay, so first up, we are going to go in breakout rooms and share a moment of us being a teenager, one of our angstiest moments. So since I came up with this, I had an opportunity to think about mine. And so to get folks comfortable, I'm going to share in the big group. And it's fine if you don't have an idea yet, but like we're all camp people. So lean in and I'm going to share and then send you in breakout rooms, and everyone is going to get a minute to share their name, maybe your role at whatever camp you're at, and then one of your angstiest moments. So mine is being vulnerable here. As a teenager, I think I was probably 16 or 17. I really, really wanted to go to a concert in New York City. It was Fleetwood Mac, and I really wanted to go with my sister. And it was like their revival. They were like the OG Fleetwood Mac. We're going to be at Madison Square Garden in New York City. And my parents didn't want me to go for whatever reason. And I wrote a letter to them, the angstiest letter that said that I couldn't believe that they would let me go to something like prom, but not this concert, which meant more to me. And looking back, it's like that, like, OMG, so embarrassing feeling that you get when you think about these angsty moments, that I think kind of takes the cake for me. I never really like fought with my parents except for that. So I know this activity is silly, but I think it's important to remember what being a teenager is like and how any like inconvenience or feeling feels like the biggest thing going on in your life right now. And that totally shows up at camp, right? So low stakes. If you don't want to share, you don't have to. But if anything about being a teenager comes to mind, I think this would be a good exercise. So I am going to put us in breakout rooms, and you will have let's say, let me see how many people are here. Okay, let's say everyone gets like 1 minute to share. So we will come back at like 3:10. I'm gonna send you in there now. Have fun. If you want to discuss something completely different than this, I'm never gonna know. Like this is for you. So do your thing, and then I'll see you back in 5 minutes. That's something I'm going to forget. We're going to do breakout rooms a couple more times. So please remind me if I don't remember to record again. But I do think about that, not only like we talked about that when you're a teenager and inconvenience or a hard situation or a big feeling is like the most important thing in your life and really hard to get through. I also think that because of those moments, we don't always want to go back to thinking about what it is like to be a teenager. A lot of us carry some hard stuff from that time. And like, I don't know about anybody else who shared, but when I was sharing my story, I was like, I can't believe I'm sharing this with a group of strangers. This is like so stupid. And a little bit embarrassing, but I think that that's important to remember and think about when we're working with teens, and to not write off some behaviors or ways that teens approach camp as like moody or unfair or rude even, but that it's really hard to be a teenager. And so it's important to kind of take ourselves back to that to better empathize with people and relate to teens. So next, I want to do a Mentimeter to kind of get a sense of where folks are at, just because we haven't met as a group before. And I want to make this the most meaningful hour and a half to you. So I have just 2 questions. If you haven't done Mentimeter before, you can use your phone or a computer, and you can either click the link that I put in the chat or go to menti.com and use the code right at the top, 6658979, and this should come up on whatever screen you're using. You then can submit an answer, and the idea is that we'll all get to see each other's on the screen. It won't say who said what, but it's kind of a good way to collect people's thoughts. So just come off mute and let me know if you have an issue. If not, I'll assume that everyone has this on their screen. Okay, so 2 pretty similar responses so far. We'll give this one another minute. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of mental health concerns, and going from 2 almost 3 years of isolation to welcome to camp, where we want you to meet new people and put on silly costumes and be like a kid again, is like a huge ask when it comes to supporting social needs, like y'all said, conflict resolution, language barriers, being motivated by risk-seeking behavior. Okay, this is all really good stuff. And Jay, no problem, saw your chat. Thanks for letting us know that. Take your time. Cool. So kids are coming with a lot of stuff, and we're hoping to support them through that stuff. That much is clear. My next one is, I want to get a sense of, what do you feel most confident about when it comes to working with teens? Opposite of the previous question. Cool. Mm. Okay, so we got building relationships, connecting through conversation, helping them share about themselves, relating to others, supporting older teens as they learn how to teach different activities. That's cool. So, like bringing up teens to maybe support younger campers, providing a place for teen-centered experiences, relating to their phase of life and decision-making tendencies, engaging them in deeper conversations. Okay, cool. So very interesting. We're all coming from very different backgrounds and running very different programs this summer, I think. But these answers are like very, very similar. We're really concerned about mental health needs and how teens are going to show up at camp after the super rocky past few years that they've had of not being in school and responding to trauma and different parts of the pandemic. And we're feeling most confident about that stuff that summer camp is so good at, like building relationships, creating awesome programs, and connecting with kids. I think that the things we feel most confident about are the antidote to a lot of our concerns. So let's dig into that more. I'm going to pull the slides back up. If you're just joining us, welcome. We were just getting a sense of how folks are feeling about programming for teens this summer. So a lot of us mentioned the mental health needs that teens are coming with, and I want to put some like real numbers to that. So what is up with the teens? According to the CDC, 37% of teens experience depression. This is from a study from 2019, where 37% of teens said they had experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in the past year because they couldn't participate in regular activities. About 1 in 6 students reported making a suicide plan in the past year. That's heavy. Mental health claims doubled during the pandemic in a recent report, and that report deals with private health insurance claims. So we're not sure what that looks like outside of that too, which is important to consider when we think about privilege in class and all of that. Mental health related emergency visits increased by 31% from April to October of 2020. And we know that a lot of this is a result of our world being flipped upside down, teens being one of the most targeted populations at that, despite the fact that predictability is a stabilizing force for teens, which was absolutely pretty much impossible during the pandemic. So this stuff is heavy. This stuff is real. I don't say this to bring us all down, but first to validate your concerns that you all said of, yes, teens are coming with really heavy stuff. And I think that what I want to transition to for the rest of our time together is that camp is one of the best places to support a lot of teens' needs. We create intentional communities each summer with a group of young adults who are dedicated to supporting youth and creating awesome programs for them and making real authentic connections with them. I think that's a superpower that summer camp has, is that whereas teachers and counselors and therapists provide so much professional and necessary expertise, our camp counselors are just a little bit older than teenagers and are still really able to relate to what that's like. Some of them are still teenagers themselves and are able to relate to what being a teenager is like. And I think therefore create that sense of belonging and connection that is so needed for teens always, but especially right now as we think about these numbers. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Okay. Cool. Let's keep moving. Okay, so this is an acronym that I created called RICE Squared that is about building relationships with teens. Also, I should mention that if you are a note taker, there will be a handout sent out to y'all after this, sent by Allison. that includes this information and a little bit more details than are what on the slides. But I like this because it's hands-on and you can share it with your teen staff or any of your staff, really. It does apply to building relationships with all ages, except that it's geared towards teens. So it has a little bit more of an extra focus on things that we can do differently with teens than we might with younger campers. So first up is that relatability piece. We all talked about that, and many of you shared that that's a big part of what you're confident about when it comes to building relationships and connecting with teens. Being a teenager is hard and confusing when a pandemic is not happening, and so that has really exacerbated experiences for teens. But using your connection skills to relate to teens and really learn more about their interests, their feelings, their ideas, their passions, their worries, and more, and really validating that in a real way is something that I don't think teenagers always get at home or from some of their peers in school. This next piece, include, I think is one of the most different parts of building a relationship compared with younger campers. Something unique that teens bring to summer camp is that they don't need to be taken care of in the exact same way as younger campers. They might not need all your reminders about brushing their teeth or not leaving their towel at the cabin to get to the showers, whatever it might be. But by honoring their independence and intelligence, include them in your decision-making process. When you're thinking about developing programming for teens, what kind of wiggle room do you have to ask them what they want from their time at camp? They are going to come to camp with so many different backgrounds, so many different experiences, and creating some valuable time at the beginning of the week to say, why are you here and what do you care about, I think can go a really long way when it comes to both developing program and also including them in how they want their camp experience to go. And kind of after that, what opportunities do you have to create with teens after hearing about why they came to camp or what they care about? There are, of course, special moments that can be fun to create for teens, but I think that staff have an opportunity to partner with teams to create special moments together or even for younger campers. So this might look like having a big bucket list brainstorm. We have 1 week, we have 2 weeks, we have 3 weeks together, whatever it may be. What are some things that you would love to do at summer camp that you may not be able to do at home or in other camps or programs that you're a part of? Really leaning on the fact that they are at camp for this short, structured amount of time with this one group of people who won't be together again, and how do they want to spend their time? What's important to them? I think that in my camp experience, the times where teens have gotten to do this for themselves have made them much more invested in the program rather than as the staff member kind of creating everything and then teens showing up like they're too cool to participate. So if that's happening, really turn the independence and the idea creation to them and asking how they want to spend their time at camp and why did they decide to come. Another hack idea here is allowing teens to create a special moment for younger campers. This is a really great way for teens to really embrace their leadership skills and be seen as something more than a camper by the younger kids, and also still get that play piece that maybe they are embarrassed or uncomfortable doing on their own, but if they're doing it for younger kids, it's really genuine and they really get to connect on that. I'm curious, I'm going to pause here before I get to the last two. Does anyone have an example of a teen program that they've done that they're thinking of right now based on what I've said, or maybe where older kids developed a program for either themselves or younger campers? Nothing at the moment, maybe?
I'll share. We just have 2 years of our camp, so all of our campers are teens. but the second years do come in with a lot more like we know what is happening, we own this place, kind of energy. And so we talk to them about being warm instead of cool, and challenge them to like show the people who are new like what's so awesome about the experience, and like welcome them in and remember how nervous they felt just a year before.
Yeah, I love that. And hearing that from people who are a year older than you and in the same position as you, maybe versus staff or director teams say, you're going to love it here, I think can be really meaningful and like just like more believable to see and hear it from people who are closer in age to you and also just going through a similar life experience. I love that. Thanks for sharing. We will go through at the end like a bunch of program ideas, but throw that out as you think of it, because you might inspire an idea for somebody else. And we all have had great success with this. So we all come with a lot of expertise in this area. So if things come to mind during the presentation, please just feel free to share out. I'll share one that I remember as a kid going to camp. There was a group of teens who they had some silly name like bedtime squad or something like that, but they would travel as a group to the younger cabins. I was probably like 10 at the time, and do a silly like bedtime song or a little skit or like read a story. And the teens were so into it, I remember, and it made it so much more fun and made like me less worried to go to bed as a younger kid too, and kind of alleviate some homesickness. It can also alleviate some staff stress too, because the staff are then in a role to kind of pump up the teens and have less of the whole responsibility for getting younger kids to go to bed. Kind of just have different voice in the cabin too. So any opportunities you have to create these kind of moments with team and really build them up in leaders in your community is really important. The last two, empathize and embrace, kind of go hand in hand. Empathize with the unique struggles that teens face today. That's why we started with the icebreaker question, to kind of take ourselves back to what being a teenager is like. And also embrace what your teen programming can look like when they're genuinely respected in your space and when your relationships with teens are embraced. Before we move on to conflict resolution, does anyone want to add anything else or have any questions about building relationships or anything that we talked about on this slide? I'm going to do a quick scan through.
One small thing that you just made me think of was like, I was in charge of or helped out a lot with the CITs and LITs at our camp last year. And our camp goes for lots of different years, and it was really impactful for them, I think, to have a chance to like reflect on their own experiences at camp if they had been going there for a while. So I don't know how that would look at all of your individual camps, but just giving them that opportunity to like appreciate what they have there.
Yeah, like teens have so much to offer when it comes to maintaining old traditions, but also helping set new traditions too. And I think kind of bringing them into that conversation and saying, y'all are really like the culture keepers of this place, and you help set the tone of how younger campers are going to feel. Build that up to know that that matters and that they're really respected and important in that space. And then it can make a lot of the things like conflict resolution, like we're going to talk about, sometimes easier when teens really know that they belong and that they do have more of a leadership role at camp. Thanks for sharing that, Michael. So I'm going to outline a very basic conflict resolution plan that's based in restorative practices. My background as a director at Camp Stomping Ground is being a restorative justice facilitator, both for other camp directors, and that's also the approach that we use at Camp Stomping Ground. It's a way to talk through a conflict using a conversation tool that's called a circle, where the intention is that everybody gets an equal opportunity to share. And rather than removing a person from a conversation or from a space who created harm, the person who created harm is brought into the conversation and asked to share about their perspective. So again, if this doesn't match your behavior plans or your policies and procedures in your own program, that's okay. This is a basic guide of questions to use with teens when conflict does come up. We know that no matter your program, conflict with teens is going to come up. So here is a guide of questions to use and share with your staff that can kind of create a mediated conversation. Does that make sense before I move forward with this? You can give me a thumb scale, like thumbs up, sure, sounds good. Thumbs down, I'm very lost. What are you doing? And in the middle. Okay, cool. Okay, so in a mediated conversation about conflict, you want to start with asking what happened, whether you're having a conversation with two people, or maybe it's a group conversation and there's many different parties involved. Starting with what happened kind of opens for a clean slate. Like at this point, if you're facilitating the conversation as a staff member, you may have heard that Kate was really pissed off about X, and Amelia was really frustrated at Kate for telling Michael about that, and so on and so on. There's so many different conflicting feelings that different parties may not even know about. So we're going to start with what happened and outline some agreements or rules for the conversation that say no interruptions, everyone's going to have an equal opportunity to share, and we're asking you to show up in an honest way. So depending on the root of the conflict or how tense it is, these agreements and rules that you want to start with are really important and may change. Also, kind of when thinking about this as it's different with teenagers, I think that you can be a lot more blunt about what you're asking for than you might be with younger campers. So after folks get an opportunity to share what happened, you can then ask how they're feeling about things. So Bailey, you were really pissed off that Eric talked about you behind your back. How do you feel right now? Like now that you've heard how this party feels, how do you feel right now? And for some conversations with younger campers, you'll want like a feelings chart. Teens are really well versed in this stuff. And I think the added kind of challenge is that while they have the language, maybe they don't always want to use it. And so be okay with kind of giving teens space during this time, but asking how they feel can kind of get at what is really needed from them. Which brings us into the next question, what are you needing? This might be from me, this counselor, this might be from the other camper that you're in conflict with, this may be from like the greater camp community. Maybe there's like a policy that you're in conflict with. What are you needing from anyone or kind of any system at camp? And then from there, making agreements and moving forward. Maybe not every single one of your needs can be met immediately, but what can we agree on right now in order to move forward? So again, this is a really basic guide, not a script to use when there's different conflicts. Y'all know your campers best, and maybe it doesn't make sense to ask these questions in this order, or maybe it makes sense to spend a lot more time on feelings than needs. Every conflict is going to be different. Every conversation is going to be different. But these are guiding questions that can help get at what really happened in a conflict, what people really need to move forward, and it makes sure that every party has an equal opportunity to share, which I think is really important and most equitable when conflicts come up at camp. My next slide is about conflict resolution kind of situations or things that are unique to teenagers compared to with younger campers. But before we move on from that, does anybody have any kind of reflections or thoughts about this guide or these questions that can kind of guide a mediated conversation?
I guess I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Just in terms of like you as asker, what, how much are you resonating? How much are you repeating back what you understand? Like, what does active listening to this look and sound like? And
Great
I have
question.
ideas, but I just feel like that should be a part of it too.
Definitely. Somebody once said to me that I know that I've done the best job as a facilitator if by the end of the conversation you forgot I was facilitating. And so I think that especially with teens, we do really want this to be on them, and they're completely capable. So I think checking in with teens ahead of time, what do you want my role to be? I think that some really helpful active listening skills to fall back on, Amelia, are definitely validating and summarizing, like you said. I think the tenser the conversation, the more important this is to repeat, okay, Amelia, what I'm hearing is from your perspective, X, Y, and Z happened. And as a result, you're feeling X. And this way, you're making sure that there's less miscommunication and less misunderstanding to get to a place where we can even begin to talk about needs and moving forward. I think that it's important to think about your relationship with the teenagers in conflict. So are you the best person to have this conversation, or have you not really spent a lot of time with them, or are you biased for some reason? Maybe you're a part of the conflict, and considering who the best facilitator should be can be really important too. At Stomping Ground, we let campers decide. They know that they can come to staff to say, I need help with a mediated conversation, or they can take it upon themselves. And then if it doesn't work, come ask for staff support. But I think that as a facilitator, as the staff member, kind of trusting your gut and speaking up when you feel it's appropriate. And also if you are seeing teens have a pretty communicative and successful conversation, really let them take the lead too. I think that it can happen both ways, depending again on the conflict and how tense it may or may not be. Does that help? Do you have more thoughts, Amelia?
Oh, that's helpful. Thanks.
Cool. Anyone else want to jump in before the next slide?
I had one or two reflections that I'd just love to share too, if that's okay. One of the things that came to mind for me is that in the experiences that I've had through camp with circles too, one of the things that coworkers have been really helpful with teaching me is that circles outside of just like mediating circles are really important too, so that young people aren't just associating like this circle time with mediation. So finding times to just like normalize circles as a practice of just celebration and like relationship building as well, and using some of those same strategies in both of those areas. And then something that one of my coworkers taught me that I'm really trying to center, especially when working with older youth and in like the context of leadership development, especially, is trying to encourage direct communication. So finding that balance between like being a facilitator and mediator and reflecting back. And then also, as long as it feels especially like safe enough to everyone, depending on the situation and depending on what they're needing from a facilitator. But having folks like share their experience and what happened and how they feel, and trying to like increase that interpersonal communication and that direct communication to another person. So instead of just saying like, oh, I want everyone to know I think Klee is doing a fabulous job, saying to you, for example, Klee, thank you so much for this great tool on the slide. I really appreciate you sharing this with us. Which again, I think is situation dependent, but it's something that I'm trying to center with this age group, especially knowing that there's been a lot of barriers to social communication. So just wanted to share those things out too.
Ooh, thank you, Rachel. That's so good. And I think going back to Amelia's question, that's an important role we have as a facilitator. Is it's cool to jump in and say like, hey, Rachel, just reminding you that instead of talking about Michael, I'd like you to say to him what you just said. So that happens a lot in circles. Kids say, He made me really mad when this happened. And it's saying, hey, can you start over and say that directly to Michael and help them through it. Michael, you made me mad when you stepped on my bunk, whatever it might be. That's a super important role. The other thing that Rachel highlighted is that whether you use the name circle to label these conversations or not, we like to talk about the 80-20 rule, and I think of a lot of restorative spaces refer to this. 80% of your focus should be on building relationships, and 20% of that is conflict circles or mediation, meaning that when your community is focused on relationships and connection, that 20% will get a lot easier. So when it comes to developing your programs, putting your focus on having opportunities for kids to connect and form relationships outside of a conflict mediation space is super important. Rachel, I'm curious because I know I love a lot of the work that Camp Kindred does with this. Do you have, can you give us an example of what a community building circle might be? Because I think a lot of camps do already do this, but maybe they just don't call it that. But what does that look like at Camp Kindred?
Yeah, definitely. We circle up before meals, and folks might do like a cheer or a callback in terms of attendance, but we try and do it in like a larger group circle instead of lines, just to hear different cabin names or cabin cheers. And we actually have kindred time. That's like one of our integral parts of camp. And that usually looks like about 30 minutes of time together talking about things that are going on during camp. So potentially like highlights, celebrations, challenges throughout the day, things that campers are noticing in real time, where there might be moments of tension, whether it's like interpersonal or whether it's systemic. We focus a lot on desegregation in Milwaukee and identity affirming practices. So it might be like challenging Camp Kindred as a whole to notice like, hey, this thing that we do when we're swimming at the pool, this like past tradition, like this isn't something that's making everyone feel comfortable, and here's why. So those are just some of the examples, like rapport building, adding insight, things like that. Does that kind of answer a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. And we're going to do questions and discussion at the end. So maybe if folks have more questions about that, we can definitely dive into it. But I think that, again, the point being that summer camp is already designed as a space where the sole mission, no matter what different values your camp has, or different mission statements or religious or non-religious affiliations, we are there to build relationships and connect with one another. And that is really in alignment with restorative practices. And so this is really focused on approaching conflict in a way that is, okay, conflict is inevitable and it's not something that we have to feel ashamed about, but let's bring people together who are involved in a conflict to kind of work through stuff on an equitable level. So could transition and talk totally just about conflict for the rest of the time, but I do want to get to some other stuff. But if you're particularly interested in that stuff, let's talk more at the end. I created this slide to identify teen-specific things that may come up in conflict mediation that are less likely to come up with younger campers. So for example, this slide, we use this guide at Stomping Ground and in other restorative spaces. This is a guide that's going to show up with pretty much every single circle, regardless of the age or population that you're working with. It's that basic. So this slide, I reflected on some circles that I was a part of with teens from last summer and summers past to kind of just get us ready to think about what is different about having these conversations with teens. So something that we saw a lot of last summer was trauma dumping, meaning teens getting in a group and even naming it trauma dumping themselves and sharing traumatic events with one another, sometimes a little bit randomly, sometimes in a conflict circle where that wasn't the content of discussion. But it's like there was so much and they hadn't had a space to get this out that we saw a lot of trauma dumping at camp. Did anyone else experience this last summer if you were working with teens last summer? I'm seeing a few nods. Okay, so I think, again, I think start with acceptance. This is something that may come up when doing conflict mediation with teens. And I think what we found in our space is that we had to bring teens together and narrate for them that some people are more comfortable talking about specific content or different traumas than others. And it's really hard that we don't always know each other's triggers. So we need to have a lot better intentional language about this so that we're not upsetting someone or oversharing in a group that's inappropriate. So it's like teens almost couldn't understand the rules about when that was acceptable or when that was okay and what wasn't. I think a lot of this just from the lack of socialization. It was like, wait, what's okay to share? What's not okay to share? And how do I do it? And so I think first important step is reflecting with your team. What are you okay with being discussed in a group and what are you not? Are there certain camp policies that you really don't have control over? And so you have to kind of think about that and share that with teens. The way that we kind of coached our teen staff through this is if in the event something was shared in a group that we felt was inappropriate to have discussed, then we would validate teens by saying, I am glad you feel safe with us to share that. At this moment, I'm redirecting us all to stick to the conflict at hand, but I would like to talk with you about that one-on-one after this conversation. Validating them for sharing, because that means that they've really built trust with who's ever in that conversation, but making sure it's clear to them that right now there's a different discussion being had and you will follow up with them. That way you can come prepared and there's no other campers or teens present who may not be ready to hear that and kind of lined in the sand, not an appropriate time to talk that out. I think that it's also super important. We all have different systems around communicating with parents and caregivers and families at home. But I did find myself communicating with parents of other campers. Hey, I just wanted you to know that Rosie was in a circle when a camper shared that they had thought about self-harm, for example, and here's how we responded in the moment. And I wanted you to know that. And parents really appreciated that transparency. And we were able to tell them, here's how our staff is trained to step in if that happens. But we wanted you to know that your camper heard that before we were able to step in. And so if they have questions or they want to talk to you about it, or you want to talk to us more, this is open lines of communication. That kind of avoids that like gut-wrenching, scary email you get weeks later in October or something when you don't even remember which cabin was whose, when a parent is like, my kid heard this, like, what was all that about? And you like don't even remember because you were doing 5 million things at camp. Keeping parents in the loop can be super helpful. The other thing, know your role. We already talked about this. Maybe you're not the best person for this conversation. Feel free to call in another staff member who might have a better relationship with kids in the circle. Again, like Rachel reminded us, that these hard conversations only work when we have real relationships with the people involved in conflict conversations. So it doesn't always make sense to bring in somebody who doesn't have a relationship with the teenagers already. I think also consider, is there content that you are uncomfortable discussing? You're a person too, and you bring your own stuff, even though you're older and your role at camp is to be a support as a staff member. If there's content that you carry a bias about or that can be a trigger for you, make sure you're checking in with yourself or your staff having these conversations too, because that's going to be harmful to place that on somebody else. We talked about how it's okay to be blunt. You could be a little bit more clear about what you're needing from a teenager in the moment and use that language that younger kids might not have. I think the other thing to consider is that these conversations may take longer than they do with younger kids, as developmentally teens feelings impact them at a different level and sometimes can feel more intense, which means that people may not always leave happy. It's okay if a conversation about conflict ends and people aren't like walking away, holding hands, calling each other BFFs. If that doesn't happen, that doesn't mean that you have failed. It means that you are able to open that conversation up again if needed, and you have created tools and language for teenagers to come back to that conversation as they need. The last little box there where I put sex, drugs, and rock and roll, again, that goes into the idea that more explicit content may be discussed in a conversation with teenagers. And so again, know your comfort level, know your camp's policies about what you're able to discuss and what not. And I think when in doubt, don't shame kids for bringing this stuff up, but rather have a pretty concise and validating response to let them know that now might not be the time, but their thoughts and feelings about those things are really important. I developed some examples of setting boundaries with teens that can come up in conversations with conflict, but also just in general. So again, I kind of want to do a check-in point before moving into that. Can I get another thumb scale before asking for questions? Just like general energy engagement level right now, like how are we feeling? Okay. Cool. Does anyone want to share anything about some of those more teen specific things we talked through before going into how to set boundaries with teens? Oh wait, hold on. Okay. You were all gone for a second, so I didn't see, but I think we're good if nobody came off here. Okay. So these are all based on real life events that have happened at Stomping Ground or in my other experience with teens. And if you want to add anything or maybe add something similar, I think that could be helpful to share as well. So let's talk through these things and we will go from there. So the first example I have here is about being in a group. Kind of this relates to the trauma dumping idea, and this could come up in a conversation about conflict or not. Somebody overshares in a group and your response could sound like, thank you for sharing that, Clyde, and I'm sorry that happened to you. Right now is group share, and I will follow up with you about that after this activity. So I think that this can happen if it feels like one teen is maybe hogging the mic or sharing something that is not appropriate for that time. This is what a boundary may sound like. I think it's also important to give campers these tools. This is something that worked really well with one of our teen groups last year. There was a lot of disagreement about what was okay to discuss and what wasn't. And so we talked about that as a group, we would agree to say, hey, is it okay if I talk about dating, for example, in a group, and then allow campers to agree or say like, no, thanks. And if somebody said no, thanks, you had to honor that no and move on. It's asking consent before talking about difficult or different kind of conversation topics. Does somebody have a way that they might respond to this differently or set a different boundary when somebody overshares in a group? There's no like right or wrong answer. We're all humans and these things should be genuine and not like robotic. And so this is kind of one way to set a clear boundary. I'm curious if anyone has a way that they might say it a little bit differently. Or has this happened to you and you immediately regretted how you responded?
This happened to me with younger campers, actually, and I thought it was helpful what you said about following up with like the bystanders, basically. That I think that wasn't part of the response at the time. This was many years ago when I was a counselor, and I thought that was a helpful suggestion. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of time to me, honestly, to
Yeah.
think about doing that. Like I would probably still pick and choose like when I would want to do that, but I think there are definitely things, and like that instance that I'm thinking of that I experienced is like that would have been a great part of the follow-up.
Mhm. Cool, thank you. All right, let's do another one. Another thing that I have encountered in conversations, more specifically about conflict with teens, is that they just have more life experience than younger kids and have different skills to be defensive and deny accountability. And accountability is really important to certain conflict circles in order to be successful, or in order to get what the person who was harmed, what they needed. So this kind of goes back to how it's okay to be blunt with teens, and you can be more direct, especially and most importantly when you have that relationship with them. And so in a circle where a camper just continuously discounted and denied something that I knew happened because I was a part of it and I was there, it wasn't like a rumor. I said, to be honest with you, Jamie, I'm having a lot of trouble trusting you right now. Can you share what is really going on? Like, let's back up and tell me what's going on. I'm having trouble trusting you right now. I think that the more we can be real with teenagers and genuine with teenagers, the more real and genuine they're going to respond back to us. I have one more after this. Does anybody want to share how they might say this differently? Okay, cool. We're moving forward. All right, last one. A lot of our staff are always stressed about this. Raise your hand if you never know how to tell your staff how to answer if a camper says, do you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, or partner? This can happen at age 6 up to age 16, 17, however old. You have campers, but I think, again, validate. You can start with what makes you ask. They might be curious for a reason, and they might not even care about your answer, but rather they want to talk about something. So I typically like to start with that. And then as far as how you want to follow up with that, if they ask again, or if they're really pushing to know, I think it's really up to your camp policies and your comfort level. I know some camps say, in no circumstance should you talk about romantic or sexual relationships. Of course, you never want to talk about sexual relationships with campers, but some camps have more clear boundaries on that than others when it comes to romantic relationships. And so one boundary might be, I appreciate you getting to want to know me, but that is something personal to me, so I'm not going to share. Or I have seen some staff members do this successfully, where they share, yes, I'm in a relationship, and that doesn't mean that they're going to offer any details or give any more information beyond that. But in some situations where teens are respecting that boundary, it can be okay to share. So again, fall back on what your camp policies are and what you are comfortable sharing. If it's something that's awkward or uncomfortable with you, of course, don't violate your own boundaries to ask a question of a teen. It's okay to like respect that for yourself and kind of fall on the validating and then letting them know that that's not something that you will share. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. We'll have time to come back to that at the end, but I think some key takeaways for these: it's okay for your boundaries to change. So maybe you set some boundaries with your teens as a group, and then you realize that they've taken it too far, something's not working. Come back to conversation and be like, yo, this isn't working. I still feel like we're being inappropriate about this, or X, Y, and Z. And you can kind of change, again, partner with them and include them in that conversation. It's really only going to work if you have their buy-in. Validate, don't shame. So we talked about that a lot. Instead of saying, why would you ask that? Or you're so immature, validate why they're curious. And then kind of go from there. We talked about that third one a lot. And then lastly, I think it's important to think about how empathy requires reflecting on our own experiences. Again, if you need to take a break at any point, or you need to express your own discomfort about something, and you don't really know how to do that, fall on your peers, your support staff, to maybe get help through that, instead of just kind of burying your own stuff down or projecting that onto others. Okay. the last thing we're going to do together, it's 4:00. I'm going to run through 5 program ideas for teens. This is like a wonky transition from boundaries to like fun, silly, hype ideas. And so I'm going to run through that pretty quickly. And then we are going to save the last like 10 minutes to put you in breakout rooms and develop your own programs. I was aiming for 2. We'll see how much time we have. And then we're going to come back, share with one another, and follow up with Q&A. Cool. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. Cool. Okay. All right, I'm taking a sip of water. I'm going to talk a little bit fast, but I want to get through this so that y'all have time to brainstorm together or share your own program ideas that have gone really well that maybe other camps want to utilize. So here we go. Teen programming, rapid fire. The first one is Zombie Prom. This has been epic in our programming and become a really awesome tradition the past few years. You're transforming a space of camp into an all-out prom. I'm talking decorations, punch bowl, snack table, write out invites, include teens in this. Let them create their own prom dresses and different outfits and different makeup and hair. Let them choreograph dance moves that they want to do at prom. An awesome part of this could be transporting teens from one place to where the prom is. So last year for us, this was in a crazy rainstorm. So we literally drove cars from one part of camp up to the dining hall where prom was and acted as a limo service and had our staff dress up. Other than that, there's a dance party, there's a photo booth, there's different things going on at the prom. And it's been a really epic event for us. Next idea is open mic night. You would be really surprised how many teens are willing to share their talents if you haven't done this with your program before. I think you can kind of take this one of 2 ways. One way could be a pretty like chic, like coffee shop vibe where there's like tea and snacks for kids. The other kind of vibe you can go with is like high-end open mic night, more like karaoke and a little bit higher energy, but have a sign-up sheet, tell teens, about a beginning of the week so they have some time to prepare if they want. Have staff set the stage and have staff share performances too, to kind of illuminate what that's going to be like, but also help teens feel more comfortable sharing. And ending with a group karaoke for the sense of belonging and connection for anyone who didn't want to perform can be a very awesome way to close. The way kids cheer each other on during this activity is always so unforgettable to me. It's like the teens who haven't really talked a lot all week get up there to do something, and the more like energetic or like quote unquote cool kids cheer them on is like always I think just like very special and very like clear to me in the moment. Okay, next we got rave. This is another high-end teen activity. What kind of program supplies or resources do you have to invest in black lights or glow sticks or disco balls, whatever you can? I think a really cool part of teen programming is getting them involved in the setup process. So what kind of artistic abilities do teens have to make homemade parts of this kind of setup and homemade disco balls and invitations and all of that? Have a special DJ, have one of your staff members dress up as a special DJ and play tunes. Have a staff member lead a group dance to help people feel comfortable. And then ideas for teens who may not love these higher energy activities, which really works for the open mic night too. You can have a setup and stage crew, so they kind of tear down the event and keep track of who's performing. You can have security guards dressed up as security guards who let people into the rave and maybe have a silly question or they have to like do something silly to get in. You can have photographers and paparazzi for kids who don't want to like just hang out on the dance floor, perform. You can have servers come around with snacks. You can have a stage manager. You can have a DJ assistant. Really think outside the box to kind of meet every different idea of fun that different teens might have based on their interests. Okay, next we have graffiti art. Invest in some spray paint or really any different materials. and allow teens to create something that will last at camp for a long time. Service projects or creative contributions are great. Graffiti art is just one of these. But I think graffiti art specifically is a really mature and cool activity for kids to bond and play with materials that kind of feel like dangerous or like more exciting, like while at camp in like a safe space. We did this with teens last summer and they spent like 2 hours doing it and were like wanted to take pictures of it and like showed all the parents when they got there. And I think, again, it's just one of those activities that doesn't really happen outside of a summer camp space in the way that it could. Okay, and lastly, one of my favorites, vacation in Teen Town. Transform teens' living space into a vacation town for a day. So we probably spent like $20 on like blow up pools, excuse me. We already had a bunch of other program supplies. We made decorations. We made fun juice drinks for teens to enjoy and let them kind of just have this in their space where like the rest of camp isn't a part of it. And fun music was playing. We had staff like stop by, but it definitely felt like this kind of like cool club, secret to the teens and special for them. I think that the theme kind of with all of these is creating special, more mature, big moments that younger campers may not get to do. I think in every single one, there were snacks involved, truly the way to teens' hearts. Snacks and like fun ways to socialize are really important. I feel like our teens like always ate full meals, but we're always hungry. And don't forget that while these special like teen specific programs are really epic and important, also build in time for them to do some of the activities that younger kids do too, because I do think teens still want that. And when in doubt, again, ask them and include them in that conversation of, you know, how much time do they want with main camp with the younger kids and not, and what kind of control and flexibility do you have in your program and your schedule to make that happen. So that was rapid fire. Hopefully you liked maybe one of those or a portion of one of those, and it made you think differently about a program at your camp. I now want to put y'all in 2 breakout rooms and take these rooms how you want. Like I always, when I'm doing these, I'm going to give you a prompt, but if you would like rather discuss boundaries or conflict resolution with teens, like that's okay. This is your time. But what I would love to happen is develop 1 to 2 program ideas with your group that you could see your camp implementing this summer. Maybe you have one to share that somebody else wants to do, or maybe you build on a program that both of your camps do and kind of make it bigger and better. We are going to take until 4:20 in breakout rooms together. Why don't we'll call it 4:15 and I'll check in and see if folks want more time. How about that? Kind of depending on what you want to do. Does anyone have questions before we go in breakout rooms? I just whipped through that. I acknowledge that. Okay. So those should be open now. I'm going to check in at 4:15 with both groups and we'll see if we want more time or not. Godspeed. When I snooped on them, I heard golf cart, blindfold. So I don't know. Hopefully we're going to hear something interesting. Rosie, what are you working on?
Oh, it's a baby blanket for my friend's upcoming baby.
Nice. I love those colors.
Thanks.
Okay. Welcome back, people. So we had 2 groups, and I'd love to just hear a synopsis from each one. If there's somebody from each group willing to share just like what y'all talked about, whether it's a new program idea or not, just take like 2 minutes to share, and then we're just going to end with general questions or any other discussion. So is anybody willing to go first to tell us what their group talked about? Just jump in whenever.
Our group talked about like how important it was to give opportunities for teens to have time just alone with each other and their kind of staff members versus time where they're interacting with the whole camp. So that was one thing. And then in terms of like specific programs, we were thinking the zombie prom idea was really fun. Depending on the camp that you work at, you might have younger campers that are scared of zombies. And so if that's the case, maybe like you could do a similar thing, but maybe with just a different sort of theme. Like we talked about like superheroes and celebrities being an option. So you could have people go in like groups of like 4 to 5, dressing as maybe from like their favorite group of superheroes or something.
I love that. And I love what you said about giving teens time to hang out with themselves. Like I know something common about most camp programs is having some sort of like rest hour or downtime. And I feel like walking through Stomping Ground, like the younger camp village is like raging party hour, even though it's supposed to be like downtime. And you go and the teens are literally just like chilling on their bunks, like loving that unstructured time. So definitely important to make sure teens get that, and maybe they even need like more of that than younger campers. So I also love rebranding prom to many different themes. Okay, other group who was not in Michael's group that could give us a little recap. I should have wrote this down. Kate, were you in Michael's group?
Sorry, which group? Were you talking to me?
Yes. Can you share from your group? Would you be willing? Thank
Sure.
you.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
We talked about a couple different things. I think I personally was struggling a little bit because we don't have, like, the more we talked, the more I was like, oh, we do have opportunities to, create new all camp events. But something that we talked about at the end was this counselor hunt sort of event that my camp does, and Joshua's camp and Grace's camp, I think, do. And there's just a couple different ways to run that sort of activity, but sounds like we both get a lot of engagement and the kids really enjoy that. Recently my camp has given campers have started, the last year campers for the oldest have like taken ownership over. It used to be like a counselor led thing, and now those guys lead the charge, and that's pretty neat. What are some other things we talked about, like hiking or sort of like excursions away from camp, and how to maybe like bring in some camp activities into those spaces as well. And there's a couple of different ideas that were floating around. Some other people talked about like a survivor type of activity. Somebody said a chopped kind of event, which I loved. Want to do that. Yeah, but anyone else from my group, feel free to jump in there. I don't know if I covered it all.
Those are so good.
Yeah.
I feel like a secret hack that happens at Joshua, did you want to add one?
I just was literally going to say, I feel like those are the main things we talked about. So
okay, cool. Yeah, something that we usually do at Stomping Ground is giving, when our teens are doing like our big night games or evening programs, giving them a special role, which they love. Like, so staff getting their costumes on, like teens want to be a part of that too. And instead of play the game, they maybe they're like part of like the villains kind of like posse, or maybe they're like running a station of the game. I think, again, giving teens those opportunities for leadership will just kind of buy them in, and you see them get like so silly with it, and it's like so cool to see. And they are playing, we're just like making it almost like more like acceptable, like developmentally for them to play. And again, that's one of those things that you can include teens on, like, do you want to have a role or do you want to play? And maybe there's opportunity for the group to kind of do both. Cool. So love those ideas. With our last few minutes here, I just kind of want to open the floor for general discussion or questions about anything that we discussed today.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was really interesting to think about was boundaries with teens, and especially when it comes to when they do get curious about relationships and things like that. And I think I have like an interesting perspective on that because I actually worked with my girlfriend at camp, but I think it's really important for campers to see two Black people in a loving relationship, especially two queer people. So I always felt super proud to like talk about that and share that with my campers. Um, so yeah, I think it's just an interesting way to think about those conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jay. That is so important. And summer camp can be such a special place to say, here's what a healthy relationship looks like. And I am so grateful that you're somebody who honors that and is able to share appropriately with campers, because that is so important. And as teenagers, we don't always see that, and we're not always given access to that like you're talking about. So thank you so much. And thank you for being somebody who is self-aware enough to know what your boundaries are about that and being genuine with the campers that you work with. It's a really important perspective to have. Other thoughts or questions from today, or maybe something that you want to leave with, or maybe a new perspective you have about how you're thinking about teen programming this summer?
I think for me, we're thinking a little bit about some of our traditions, just, they don't have a place anymore at our camp, and also some of them were just like dangerous. And so shifting away from that, but also at the same time, like hearing some of our older junior counselors or last year campers being like, well, that was a tradition, and like, why are you getting rid of it? And they like feel like this FOMO, and you're like, it wasn't fun, like it wasn't a fun thing. So I think like hearing you, or just this has been helpful, and sort of remembering that like when we pull them in and they can kind of like buy into it, and maybe they have ownership over creating new things and new traditions, like that can be a good way to sort of continue to move forward. So I've been just thinking about that. And I just appreciated this call today, and everyone who shared. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, let your teens help you develop new traditions, and be honest with them about why you're getting rid of some of the old. Camps have a history of being rooted in whiteness and other forms of oppression, and I know that some of those traditions stay true in some camps. So if that's the case, or it's dangerous like you're saying, like what kind of honest, genuine conversations can you have with teens about, here's why we're changing it and we want you to help us make something new? Like, what are your ideas? Let's bring them to the table.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, it's 4:30. Last word, anyone? I'm okay staying a couple minutes over. Questions or anything? Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on to this. This was really fun, and I loved hearing everyone's ideas. Like I said, Allison will be sending out, Allison Crable, executive of Summer Camp Society, not talking about myself in the third person, but she'll be sending out like a write-up from today, and then you'll have access to all the recordings too. But my email is Klee, my last name, KLEE, @campstompingground.org. So if you want to chat more about these things, or you want to connect in other ways, that's how you can reach me. And also, special note from Kurtz, if you are on Instagram or TikTok and you do not yet follow the Summer Camp Society, please do. Awesome content, awesome stuff. And those numbers really help us reach more people. So thank you everyone for coming on today. And I wish you all the best of luck this summer. The work that you're doing matters, and it's important, and teenagers can be scary, but we were all there once and we got this. So thank you for the work that you do.